Okay.
All right, so today we're going to read from the ESL reading lessons, the 1970s.
Yes, the 1970s.
Okay, great. I'll ask you to start. You may start.
Okay.
The 1970s.
The 1970s. The 1970s were a 10-year period that began in 1970 and ended in 1979. This was an interesting decade because it was a time of economic disorder, technological development, and social change. The economy of the 1970s went through several ups and downs. In 1973, and then again in 1979, there were shortages of oil. This meant that the cost of many things increased, but unfortunately, people's salary didn't increase. Another economic problem was that many people lost their jobs and could not find new ones. These problems happened in North America, Europe, and Russia. On the other hand, in some Asian countries, such as Japan, Hong Kong, South Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan, the economies were good. This was because this country exported things that other countries bought. This meant that money was coming into these countries and people in these countries as jobs. Several important and interesting technical developments happened during the 1970s. A lot of the technology we use in our daily lives today was invented in the 1970s. Microprocessors, which are the brains of modern computers, tablets, and smartphones, were first invented in the 1970s. The first personal computers were made and sold during this time. People were also able to listen to music anywhere they wanted with the invention of the Walkman in 1978. The first video games were made in the 1970s. In 1971, the first email was written and sent.
Written.
The first email was written and sent. Later, in 1973, the first call on a mobile phone was made. The technology people used to grow food improved during this time. Something called the Green Revolution happened during the 1960s. The Green Revolution refers to improving farming technology. This meant that farms produce more food. This in turn meant that less people went hungry and more countries were able to produce their own food. Society also changed during the 1970s. Women began to have a more important place in public life. Isabel de Perón became the first woman president of Argentina in 1974, and Margaret Thatcher became the United Kingdom's first female prime minister in 1979. Women also started to do more work outside of the home in the 1970s. Another social change was that people began to be more and more interested in protecting the environment. When we look back at the 1970s, we can see that many interesting things happened at that time. It makes you wonder what people of the future will think of our time.
Okay, thank you. What an interesting article.
Yes.
The 70s. The 70s must be when it happened. And I remember that computer. I remember this computer so well.
Yes.
When I started my first job, we had something that looked like that as the computer. And now you have a computer that's so tiny, you can put it into the palm of your hand.
Yes.
It's amazing. All right. So let's see. They've got a few questions. We can look at the questions over here and looking at what is the main idea of the text. What do you think is the main idea of the text?
The main idea of the text is to see, to imagine that the decade of the 1970s were a technological decade where the technology in the world did a big step forward.
Yes, in the 1970s, it was a big step. That was a period of time that was a big step for society. And I would say that we could call that the time for change, innovation, and development. What was one of the two things, one of the many things that was developed or created in the 1970s? Do you remember one thing that was created?
Yes, in the 1970s is the emergence, the birth of computers and smartphones. The
Very
first
good.
smartphone and the first email.
Okay. And I don't think they were calling them smartphones yet. Were they calling them smartphones? Or the cell phone?
Oh, at this time, what was the name of the device?
I think they were just cell phones. I don't think they were smartphones.
Oh, yes, yes, you're sure you're right.
Okay. And paragraph B. What was the main idea of paragraph B?
The main idea is in the 1970s we have two big bang of shortage oil. The first was in 1974 and the second in 1979, I think. And this time, as the price of oil grows quickly, we need to invent another sort of energy. We need to think about other devices to avoid the use of oil. And at this time, the Occidental economy declined or fell, and in the opposite way, the country in Asia grew quickly because they could sell a lot of products at the Occidental country.
Okay. So the answer then in the main idea of paragraph B is that due to the price of oil changing and the benefit to some countries, they experienced good economies. So some countries had good economies and some countries had poor economies during this time. So the correct answer is going to be the one in the middle. And let's look at 3. Okay, the main idea of paragraph 3.
Information technology made progress. The time of computer
Oh, they did use the word smartphones.
Yes.
Okay, they were called smartphones. And for me, I was thinking that it was called a cell phone. Okay.
But I suppose it's a mistake. I'm sure that it wasn't smartphone at this time. It was
not what I would call a smartphone. You couldn't play games on it. You couldn't find directions. The only thing that you were able to do with that big phone.
Yes, and to take pictures with it.
Or take pictures, exactly. To me, this is the technology that made it a smartphone.
Oh, I suppose that the main idea is the main idea is in the 1970s. It was the time when computers, tablets, cell phones, and other technology were widely used.
Okay, let's take a look and see if that's going to be our correct answer. Okay, I guess it really wasn't widely used, but they were invented.
Okay.
Maybe they were invented and improved during the 1970s. Okay, so it's going to be...
New information technology were invented and improved. Yes.
Yeah, they were invented and improved. All right, well, that's not too bad. And for paragraph E is about...
Paragraph B.
E. Is it social change and powerful women, changes in society in the 1970s, the way people lived in the 1970s? Paragraph E.
Oh, yes. Paragraph E is particularly about the role of the women at this time of the
Right. Yes, that's what I think it's. I
for
think
the
it's...
first time, we see two big women who became president of their country or prime minister. Margaret Thatcher in England and Eva Perón in Argentina.
Okay. So the answer is going to be changes in society in the 1970s. And the last one is the economies of the 1970s was good for all countries.
False.
And
False.
I think that was false.
It was only good for the Asian countries.
The countries that had something to sell.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll dispense with this answering your questions. What do you remember most about the 1970s?
The 1970s were the years when I worked in a school in the north of France, and when I was professional teacher in this kind of school. And
What were you teaching?
yes, I was teaching the electricity, and it was a beautiful time of my life.
Okay, you were teaching.
I really like teaching.
Wait a minute, you were teaching electrical classes.
Yes, I teach it. I taught electrical classes.
Okay. Was this a public school?
What?
Did you teach in the public school? Do you have public schools?
No, it was a public private school, because the school was owned by Electricity of France.
Okay.
At this time. And
Okay.
at this time, there was about 10 schools in France.
10 schools.
10 schools in France who own to Electricity of France. And today, all these schools are closed because Electricity of France decided to close this school.
Oh, how long did you teach there?
I teach during 10 years.
I taught there 10 years.
From 1968 to 1978.
Ah, so that was your good year.
Yes, it was good years.
Did you all use some type of computer as well?
No, at this time, I didn't use computer. I didn't know computer at all. I used computer for the first time when I was in a new area, in a new job for Electricity of France. And the first computer was about in the years 1987. The first computer.
Okay. All right. Oh, interesting. Do you remember the cell phone? The first cell phones, they were really large, bulky.
Yes, yes. And at this time, when I was in my duty work, after I finished the teaching, I changed my work. I work as I don't know how to say that. I used to repair the problems of electricity, the wires. I have a team for that.
Mm-hmm.
I had a special car, and in the car we have a phone. But
Yeah.
it's a very big phone, very important. And every time in the evening when I was on duty, I
Yes.
need to put the phone and took it in my home for the night, because at night sometimes I was called by the customers on this phone, but it was a very big phone.
Yes, it was a very big phone, and it was one that you'd have to charge it frequently. As I remember, I had to keep it plugged into the car so it
Yeah.
would stay charged. Yeah, those were very interesting times. I think the microwave came out around the 1970s as well.
The microwave was
Hmm.
about 1970s, you're right, because when I teach it,
When
I
I
remember
taught,
that
when I taught,
when I taught, I remember that one adult asked me to explain them
hmm
the use of microwave. And
yes,
in fact, I didn't know. I didn't. It was
yes.
new. I didn't knew.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I did not realize so much had taken place in the 70s. This was the time that I graduated from high school, and
You
I did,
were you were a student at this time.
well, I graduated from high school in 1971.
91. Oh yes, it
Mhm.
was at the beginning of the 1970s. You're in the real life.
Yes, I entered into the world of work.
Okay.
Fortunately, I was able to get a job right away, and so I did not experience the loss of income. I moved out of my father's house. I got myself a car. I lived in an apartment. So I was living the good life.
Okay.
Living the
Okay.
good life at that time. All right, I will stop the video now. Just a second.